WAOH is brought to you in part by Jumpstart Video, online at jumpstartvideo.com.
All right, welcome back to Good Morning Akron, talking with all of the prospective school board candidates. I'm very excited to be chatting with Keith Mills today. Hi, Keith, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I am just fine. So we want people to get to know you. So go ahead and just share a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well, I'm 42 years old. I am a student of Akron Public Schools.
Okay.
I left. I went to Akron U twice, my undergrad and master's.
Oh, wonderful.
I'm a school teacher right now for Cleveland Metropolitan. I'm a former employee of Akron Public Schools for over a decade as a custodian, substitute teacher, as a facilities person.
Been all over the place.
Yeah, student teaching. I live in West Akron. Right behind Bookville. I actually worked at Bookville, and Myron had mentioned.
Yep, I actually
about
live right behind there as well.
That's right.
So we probably live in the same neighborhood.
We probably do, for sure. I'm married, wife. We've been, we just celebrated 13 years married.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. 3 awesome kids, and yeah, I mean, I could go on and on.
A little bit about you. No, that's perfect.
For sure.
So why do you want to be on the school board?
So, funny you ask. Being a former employee of Akron Public Schools, I really have a feel, and especially being in the position I was able to travel around and get to know how actual Akron Public Schools works.
Okay.
So they kind of failed me when I was a student, when I was going to North High School, and when I being an employee, I can see how there's gaps.
Sure.
And so, and always watching the board minutes and always watching how things go down, especially if you're an employee, you have more vested interest.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of good friends who work at APS, and they've encouraged me to run, to speak up for someone who is not employed there, so there's no conflict. Right. And how I'm a full-time teacher now up in Cleveland, and how I have a great or different perspective of how things actually run. So I want to make sure that the board thinks more than 2 steps ahead, or is knee-jerk reactionary. So
I love that.
They don't think. So I want to change that.
And I love that you even are taking your experience as a kid of not having a great experience and being able to use that to make change for these kids.
That's one of the reasons.
Kids and what?
Absolutely.
One of the reasons you want to run.
That's one of the reasons I actually went back and got my master's in education to become a teacher, because I started subbing. And I was like, oh my God, I could do this. And like, kids actually remember my name, and I was a substitute teacher. Nobody does that. So I'm like, wow, okay, I'm leaving an actual impact. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back and get my master's in special ed.
What do you teach right now?
So I just took over a multiple handicap classroom.
Okay.
I'm an intervention specialist. I'm
actually going to go down to the questions that will apply to that. So I actually had someone write some questions in. And she asked, what background or experience do you have with special education and or disabilities? So it sounds like actually you already answered that, but what would you do to ensure that every student with disabilities will have meaningful inclusion within their school environment with their peers?
So that's a huge thing. I also used to work at Portage County Board of DD. Okay, and we have a big drive to make sure kids are included with their non-disabled peers. And so there's a huge drive. So not a lot of kids. You should only be in a multiple handicap room if you actually qualify for that and can receive something that you can't necessarily get out of that classroom.
Right.
So placement is huge. Making sure their IEPs are written correctly, making sure they're vetted. You have program managers who actually go over there and stuff. And there's a whole background I could fill you in before time. But placements are huge and important, and we can't have kids, who could benefit from our services not in that class.
Right, absolutely.
And vice versa, yeah.
And she also said, if you were elected, would you be willing to meet and discuss concerns and initiatives by parents and advocates of special education students?
Absolutely. I can go on ad nauseum about APS and about special education. There's nothing like helping kids who need help and who are disabled. It's just, that's why I have a smile on my face, because I don't know. It excites me.
It sounds like this is definitely. I'm gonna connect her with you, and she can chat with you a little bit more about it, because I know this is something she really cares about. So, what do you think is working well in education right now?
Overall, or just Akron Public?
I went with Akron Public with Myron, so let's do that.
Okay. There seems to be more communication between the board and the public.
Okay.
So for a long time, you've never seen them in the paper, or no one ever actually had an eyeball on what was going on.
Right.
So that's one thing that's, I think, working well, that they're being more held accountable.
Yeah, and I appreciate that too.
For sure.
I've actually emailed some of the board this past year. I have an APS student, and I did get a couple responses, and I appreciate
Absolutely,
that they got back to me.
For sure. Another thing that's actually working for APS is we have a lot of great people who are working behind the scenes, and you know, I know them personally, and they've been there for years, and it's just, you know, so some who, you know, who aren't there, that, you know, that we've lost some departments and we have to refill them.
Right,
Stuff that's background that nobody talks about, that I want to provide consistency with.
Sure.
But yeah, that's also working great for APS.
Yeah.
Great people.
Absolutely. What do you think are the conditions necessary for learning?
I personally do not like teaching to the test. I think learning is holistic.
Yeah, that's hard.
I hate it because, you know, what it creates, so I was on Really when I was a kid, and to adapt to that, and I know a lot of people are like this, we cram, and then what I call mind dump. We go to take the test real quick, we dump all information on the paper, and 5 minutes later, it's gone because you held it in short-term memory.
So true.
So nothing's holistic, and there's a lot of disconnect between administration, teachers. There's no pipeline. The paperwork is ridiculous. There's hardly any teaching going on. It's all paperwork for the sake, and sometimes for the sake of paperwork.
Right, and sometimes it's not even, like, I'll give an example of my own daughter. She actually loves to write, is a wonderful writer, and got a lower score on her writing because she told me, well, Mom, they're asking me to write about something I don't care about, and this topic is something that, you know, it's so dull, and I'm just trying to get it done on this test. And I thought, you know, that's true. It's not really showing how good of a writer she is because she's being asked to, you know, write about something she doesn't care about.
For sure, you could actually tie that into bias. There's bias in testing, so that can touch on bias.
Absolutely.
So if they actually, the test makers, well, that's a whole different thing I could talk for a long time about, but if test makers actually took into consideration what people actually want and are interested in talking about, then that would bring out the best in that person.
Right, absolutely. Yeah. That's so interesting. What do you think education should look like in the future? Give me 10 years from now.
10 years from now, more, I'm going to go back, more holistic. You know, tests are a good measure, like maybe a snapshot, but it doesn't show the whole student. Okay. More hands-on training. And not like, oh, well, we're going to implement this in the classroom necessarily. We have a little, like a lesson where you come in and do like batteries for science or something. More like integration with University of Akron or Kent State. More, you know, those people coming into the classroom and showing. People, you know, having elementary students actually visit the high school. You know, doing things like when I was a kid, where it's more of a, you know, more of a hands-on, more of a, it's not all about the book.
Right.
It's more of an application.
Right, where they can take that stuff out into their real life.
Yes.
Apply it.
And more technology, more hands-on technology.
Okay.
It's really weird for me, being my age. So I've had a great experience where growing up, I was able to see the progression of technology. And so I didn't have a smartphone until like 08, 09, so it was awesome, right? So I wasn't glued to my phone. And so kids are more on that phone. How can we get them off of Instagram all the time? And how can we use that phone and not be scared of it? How can we use that phone for education?
Yeah, that's good. I like that. So what is your most current grassroots involvement with APS outside of your personal child or your neighborhood school?
Well, nothing really, nothing current. My wife works for Akron Public Schools.
Okay.
I'm a former employee for Akron Public Schools. You know, I coach up in Cleveland, I teach up in Cleveland. You know, we go to 1040 with Book Tour every once in a while. We have people who work there and always see the games and stuff. But yeah.
Great.
Yep.
So more in your past.
Yes.
Yeah.
Over a decade, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So where do you see inequity within APS, and how can you as a school board member address it?
Well, that's a good question. There's a technology one where you can give kids tech or access to tech, but as soon as they leave campus and they go to a library, then they don't necessarily have internet at home, or they know how to access the free internet from like Spectrum. So there's gaps there to getting things done. Kids, when you get the tech, they don't necessarily know how to use it. Don't just assume that they know how to get on the Chromebook or the iPad. Also, when you have an iPad, and God forbid, we have this happen in Cleveland all the time. If an iPad or a Chromebook is damaged, we'll give you a free one, a replacement. but then it goes, if that happens, then you owe us. But and I know the punitive side of it, but then you also have to take into account they don't have the $50 necessary to spend. So, and you have sometimes carts in the classroom, and there's a shift because of COVID. We're over that, and so they're taking computers out and stuff. And I want all schools as well to be looked at like STEM, like high school. I want them all to be, they have a certain curriculum, we should have access to it as well.
Yes, okay.
And try to, so instead of lowering the bar, to meet
raising the bar a little bit for some of the other schools that.
Yeah, for all the schools.
Yeah, for all the schools.
Instead of lowering it, because you have an intrinsic want or need to keep your graduation rate high. So if you can't raise the kid up, you lower the bar. Let's raise the bar and then help raise the kid up.
Yeah,
to meet
that's
that
great.
bar.
No, I love that. Would you have a plan if a tiny minority of people work to ban books, libraries, or librarians?
Yes.
Yes.
It's not going to happen.
I don't think it
Not
will
in my
either,
life.
but we have a community question.
No, that's a good community question, but
Yeah.
I love books and I am an encyclopedia nerd, and I think that I'm definitely not for that. I'm like that's just not. If I'm on the board, that's not going to happen. It's not going to be discussion at all. If there's no critical thinking involved, we're not even going to.
I love how actually, since people have been a small group have been wanting to ban certain books, it seems like libraries and even bookstores will now have giant displays of all the banned books, and I think that's kind of
it's
an
awesome.
Interesting comeback. Like read these ones.
there's an old saying that if you forget your past, you are doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
So if we do not bring things to light and understand, and it's not going to cause any kind of race war or a civil crisis, it's just us understanding what happened so we cannot do it again.
Exactly. Yeah, I saw a teacher in Florida was removed for giving her students the Anne Frank graphic novel.
Oh my God.
And it was just, it's so shocking to me this kind of stuff is happening.
It's such a huge story, and and I internally get emotional. I read it when I was at Perkins.
Yeah,
because the Anne Frank. It
I
wasn't a graphic, but it was the book. Right, it was part of our curriculum. And and
that it's getting removed in certain areas of the country is wild.
She wrote her whole last year. 14 years old. It's
it's important to know.
It's important.
Exactly. So we touched on those disabilities questions, so I'm going to skip over those. Sure. Who is responsible for education here in Akron?
I, being an educator, it's not just the teachers.
I agree.
And it's not just the administration.
Right.
And it's not just the person you don't see at 10 North Main, okay, the curriculum instruction person or the English department. Right. It's also the parents. It's also the after-school people, when you have after-school programs, not necessarily coaching.
Right.
But it's also the coaches. It takes a village.
It does.
It takes a village to raise a child. Okay, so we have to get back to that. I have an awesome little redhead named Ivy, and she's 5, going to be 6 pretty soon. You can't tell her nothing. She leaves the house. Sometimes we don't even know. Our neighbors have brought her back so many times.
Yeah.
And that's how every street should be.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So it does take a village.
And I agree. I mean, that's sometimes a cliche saying, it takes a village to raise a child, but it's such a true statement. We need the community. We need all of Akron to care.
Absolutely.
And to vote for you guys as school board candidates and just to care about our schools. So I totally agree with you. I think we've actually covered the rest of these questions in the beginning, so that's great. So let's go ahead and wrap it up with we're going to give some words of wisdom to the APS students today.
Okay.
Yeah.
You matter. You are important.
Okay.
And make sure you hold yourself accountable. And do not be worried about going to an adult and telling them how you feel or if you need help. There are a lot of awesome people in your schools and in your community that will help you. You probably already know that as well. If you have to, if you are worried about doing that, just go grab a coach. Coaches stay after school. Some of us don't get paid for this. We do this out of the goodness of our heart.
Yeah.
Find the teacher who's always bringing snacks in, who's always giving drinks away. Those are usually the more level-headed, cool people. You feel safe. And when all these opportunities that I wish I had when I was going to school, take advantage of them because a lot of them are free.
Yeah.
And so that's huge. Don't repeat the same mistakes that I did or I didn't have the opportunities to have access to. So
Great.
those are some words of wisdom.
All right. Thank you so much, Keith.
Of course.
Enjoyed having you. Can you share how people could get in contact with you if they're interested in chatting?
So you can just actually go on Facebook and look up Keith Mills. I'm right there. You drop me a message and I'll get back to you.
Great.
I have a website, millsforakron.com, that I check so often. And same as the email, millsforakron@gmail.
Great.
And yeah, so I'm pretty accessible. And if I do get elected, I want you to hold not just me, but all of us accountable.
Wonderful.
So message us. If you had a problem, we'll fix it. That's what we're here for.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Of course,
Appreciate
thank
you
you
being here today.
Definitely.
All right.
All right.
You guys, thank you so much for watching. We have more school board candidates coming up.